So we've just finished recording today's podcast, The Empty Project. Do you want to tell the readers why it's called The Empty Project?
We got thinking about the value of emptiness, and you'll hear all about this, about the empty spaces in our lives that are in fact incredibly precious. And after we thought this all through and we knew what we wanted to talk about, we went to record it on GarageBand. And what comes up in GarageBand when you start is it just says Empty Project.
Which is the software that we record the audio of the...
Yes, and it says that every time, but this time it was literally true. We were making
The Empty
Project.
So in today's episode, you'll hear about the ways that the culture teaches us to not see the beautiful spaces, the spaces that make everything into beauty and art and value in our lives, and how we just need to switch our attention a tiny little bit to bring all of that into focus for us and make our lives a little wilder.
Hope you enjoy it. Hi, I'm Martha Beck.
And I'm Rowan Mangan, and this is another episode of Bewildered, the podcast for people trying to figure it out, which we do for our Bewildered community, which is also known as the Kahoot. So,
one big Kahoot.
Just one big Kahoot. What are you trying to figure out, Marty?
I'm trying to figure out, I am in awe at the super senses of animules, and specifically our cockapoo Bilbo.
Oh, yes.
Bilbo Baggins of Baggin, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Because as you may have heard, we experienced an earthquake. Yes, in Pennsylvania. It was in New Jersey, I believe it was located. And I did not know the earthquake was going to come. But the weird thing is I think Bilbo did. Because he was alone downstairs. I was upstairs, which happens a lot. There was nothing weird going on. And then he started to make a noise I've never heard him make before. And it was like... oh no. And he came to the foot of the stairs and just started wailing, oh no. And I couldn't calm him down. I cuddled him and everything, but he was shaking, and then everything was shaking. And I was like, wait, this is Pennsylvania. I think I'm going to have to conclude this is an earthquake. And I started finding arched doorways before, and then it stopped after a while. But it was really weird that Bilbo had that reaction. I think he knew.
I wonder if some of his other neuroses could also be used to predict weather or big events.
It's probably every time he starts getting panicky, there's solar flares or maybe alien abductions.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, could be anything there. It's funny that you should mention the earthquake, because I too had a memorable experience during the earthquake.
Oh, did you?
Like yours, it involved someone else. All right, let me take a step back. I had an appointment that day, and it was a girl appointment. I don't mean a woman appointment. I mean, it was one of those appointments where everyone's like girls together, like their girls, your girls. It's very girly.
Are you getting a mani-pedi or something?
I wasn't, but it's like it's in that genre of appointments.
Okay.
And I was a bit bleary. It was morning. I had my coffee. I went into this appointment and I freaked out so badly that someone was about to massively overshare with me, which is just so revealing about my psyche. So because I have like a character that I do when I have to go to these girl appointments, like a girl to girl kind of thing where, because they're better girls than me. But I have worked on a character so that I want to put them at ease, and I want to look, I'm like someone who's really relatable, even though I look like this and I sound like this. And so, but then, oh God, I just thought I've done it too well. I thought that day, because I'm like at the desk. She's like, how are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm great. How are you? And she goes, I'm actually feeling anxious and upset. And she kind of burst into tears a little bit. And I was,
oh my goodness,
I started thinking about how my personal trainer has recently started being quite emotional during our sessions about his dog who's sick. And I just was like, I'm overdoing something in my public persona. And I was just like, I can't handle this today. I can't handle this girl's like
Emo.
personal issues. And I was just like, so she's like, I'm upset and anxious. And I was like, oh, you are? And just thinking, oh my God, what now? Seriously, what now? Just let me have my coffee and do what you're going to do. I'm being very careful not to say what it is. Anyway, she goes, yeah, I'm feeling upset and anxious about the earthquake that literally just happened. And that's how I found out that there had been an earthquake, significant earthquake, only moments
4.8
that I had like been driving along and listening to my tunes, and I just missed it. I don't know.
You just thought the car shocks were going.
Yeah,
and they probably did. They probably compensated for the earthquake.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, the suspension was too good. And I missed out on an important cultural moment for our town where we all would have become closer. Maybe I'm glad I missed it. But yeah, I felt bad that I'd underestimated my new gal pal. And so, you know. Anyway, onwards and upwards, Marty. We'll be right back with more Bewildered. We don't say this enough. We are so glad you're a bewildered listener. And we're hoping you might want to go to the next level with us, by which I mean if you rate and review the podcast, it helps new people find us so we can keep bewildering new souls, and you know how much we love that. Ratings are very much appreciated. Obviously, the more stars you give us, the more appreciation is forthcoming. Reviews are quite simply heaven, and we read every one and exclaim over them, and we just love you all. Mwah.
Onwards and upwards. Well, let's talk about a topic of some sort.
Yeah. So today's topic.
What is today's topic?
Today's topic on Bewildered, the podcast in which you currently are living, is one that I think probably many, if not all of our listeners will really relate to. And it's like, ever feel like life is full and your job is to cram more stuff into the tiny bits of time you already have, and you're trying to fill something that's already full?
Yep, 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. I used to do this demonstration, and I thought it was so cool. I saw it, and I immediately adopted it and started using it in presentations. You take a quart glass bottle, and you have a pile of sand and a pile of rocks, and you say the rocks are the important things in your life, and the sand is the unimportant stuff in your life. And you pour the sand into the bottle, and then you try to put the rocks in, and they won't fit. And then you pour it all out again. You put the rocks in first, and then you pour the sand in, and the sand fills the spaces between the rocks.
It like trickles in between into the nooks and crannies.
You can fit it all in. And the idea is do the important things first, which is, okay, it's a good message. I would stand by it, but it means you're filling every single bit of your life with stuff.
I don't think it's a good message. I think it's a good strategy for achieving the wrong message.
Yeah, and it has the wrong message, which is you should put every single thing that you can even think of to do in every inch of space in your life. Yeah. And then you'll be really efficient and effective. And won't that be wonderful? How much stuff you have.
Yeah, it's wild. So we sort of ourselves realize that this is one of those areas where the culture is doing its invisible damage, you know, where we aren't even aware that we're like eating these damaging messages or breathing them or drinking them. So we thought today, and tell me where I'm expressing this badly, Marty, but we thought we would sort of dig into the ideas of fullness and emptiness and like how we live our lives as a bewildered coot.
Yes, I thought that would be really good too, because there is research on this. People these days are feeling more and more overwhelmed, more exhausted, more burnt out. I mean, typically they say than ever before in history. I don't know, because they're not measuring things that happened, 600 years ago.
Maybe and why not?
Overwhelmed. People were overwhelmed by dying at 30 and having to carry water,
Bubonic plague.
Yeah, the bubonic plague was very overwhelming. But in our particular cultural model, that is developed Western cultures, again, There are many, many cultures. And when we say the culture, we're talking about the dominant Western culture that sort of overtook the earth.
Colonized
the earth in the 20th century. Okay. This particular culture, the fact that it came out of a localized place, Western Europe, and colonized the entire earth is because it's driven by an obsession with getting more stuff and conquering and, and occupying and learning everything and taking everything.
Stuff. Like we're so focused on stuff that we cram our lives to the gills with it. And we don't know how to value the non-stuff, the emptiness. And I don't think we even know that it's there sometimes. I don't even think we see it because it has no value in our culture.
I really, really believe that's true. People do not know. Like, one of the things I hear from clients a lot is, I've never had a peaceful moment. Because the part of them saying that really hasn't. It's this, the part that's aware of the stuff. And when and I can do something like, let's do a meditation exercise. And then they get this really deep peace and their bodies feel better. But at the end of the session, the part that does the stuff comes back online and literally doesn't remember because there was nothing happening. So what's to think about, right?
Fascinating.
It was nothing. And I've been thinking a lot about it because I have been trying to learn how to do transparent watercolor, something I started in my teens and then didn't do for like decades.
Listener, I just have to put this in. Marty is an amazing artist. Yes, it's annoying. She's too good at too many things, but she's actually genuinely, I hate to say it, fucking talented. And soon you'll be able to buy prints of her work. So that's just a little side project I'm puttering away on, and as I cram my life full of stuff.
Just a little tiny thing. But I remember walking along when I was about 16 years old and I just started playing with watercolor and realizing I have to learn to think about everything differently. I'm used to drawing things, trees, birds, cats, people. And what I have to learn is to see light where it's not impeded by things and to put that first. You have to think in reverse when you do watercolor because the most important thing you have to work with, all the light in your painting, is the blank white paper. If you touch that with any kind of color, there's no erasing and all the light goes out of your painting and it looks crap. So the whole thing is to sit down and say, where do I leave it blank? Where do I leave it blank? And you keep those are the most precious places in the painting and you guard them with your life. And if you have to put something in them, you do it with incredible caution and you do it sparingly. And it's the opposite. You sit down and think, where is there nothing that I have to? Nothing is the only value here.
That is so cool. So our socialization, our sort of culture training, is in art, but also in everything really. It tells us to focus on the thing. In this case, the dark marks you're making on the white page, because we don't see the white page. But you're saying the whiteness itself is its own presence.
Is by far the most important thing. That, like, every teacher will tell you, don't touch that white space. You'll lose it, and it's your most precious thing. And I was saying to you, most of us are still focused on the things, like in the Great British Baking Show, which we both love. They want you to make a whole bunch of things, and they have to be perfect and all alike, like a row of soldiers.
Of soldiers.
They line up. They look.
Hashtag Mary Berry. Yes. If you know, you know.
Yes. They line up. They look exactly the way you want them to, and they kill you in the end. But then you said something that I hadn't even thought of.
Right. So,
which was
the row of soldiers is, it's a row of soldiers, like it's a row of shortbread biscuits, right? The cookies. So the row
with murder in their minds. They want to take your stuff.
Oh my God, it's funny because it's true. But the row of soldiers image itself, I realize, is only beautiful because it makes a pattern by virtue of the spaces between each of the items, right? So because without any spaces, it's just a slab of dough, like it's just a glob of stuff. But with spaces, suddenly it's art, even though it's biscuits. And And Marty, I saw it also. I have a new hobby.
Huh?
Should have talked
Yes,
about
you
that
do.
earlier.
Tell them about your new hobby. It's
I've
wonderful.
got a new hobby which I really like, which is making beads. Yeah, making bracelets.
If you have video, you can see the one that she made for me today.
This this is an
It's very pretty.
This is an
Trust
audio medium. Please, let's focus on the audible.
It's so pretty.
So, I have been making bracelets, and I realized that if I just line these, I've got these beads that are kind of like flat, like tiles, and if I just put them all together one after the other in a bracelet, it's okay. Like, but if I take a little tiny bead and put a space between each of the beads, then it's like suddenly it just pops and it's beautiful, like really, really beautiful. And I just like it just becomes entrancing, the beauty of it. Like and you get the tiny ones in between can be like gold, and then it's like light coming through a stained glass window or something. You know, it's like the spaces between these beautiful beads are the thing that gives the beads their beauty.
Yeah,
in a way.
Yeah. It's gorgeous. It looks like if you go online these days, you cannot avoid the image of kintsugi, which is the Japanese art of you make a beautiful clay pot, then you break it, and then you glue it back together and sort of solder the cracks with gold.
If you haven't seen this, go on the website of literally any life coach ever. It's a metaphor that's really seized the wellness industry's imagination.
Oh, your wholeness is golden because you are so smashed.
You were smashed and now you're golden. We had such a funny thing. So Marty wanted to order one of these kintsugi bowls for our friend Liz as a gift. And so, because now they get made deliberately, because capitalism is just such a fascinating beast. So then someone out there is deliberately making a bowl, smashing a bowl, mending the bowl with gold in order to make the point that having been smashed, bowl is now more beautiful. And then we order it to give it to our friend to say, I don't care if you're smashed, you can be mended and still more beautiful.
Yeah, and we did this for Christmas, and it was months later.
I know.
She still hadn't collected it. We had it there. We had it all wrapped up. It came all gift wrapped, so we just had it in the cupboard.
We hadn't looked.
For months and months.
And little Marty with her little face was so proud of her gift and like all like excited to show it. And Liz is there opening it at our kitchen counter, and we all like, the box opens and we all peer in, and what did we see, Marty?
Basically Armageddon.
It was like so the bowl had been made, had been smashed, had been mended,
and then smashed a lot harder.
It was so funny because it wasn't like cracked, and it wasn't just like, it was just a pile of rubble in the bottom of the box, like, and dust.
It was post-apocalyptic. Yeah.
It was, you know what? They could have sold it as a DIY kintsugi kit. Like, they just send us the rubble of a former bowl and we have to build it ourselves. Anyway.
Out of the gold we have lying around.
I have some beads.
Well, you do. Beads.
Beads and glue. Oh,
anyway, speaking of post-apocalyptic times, I think one of the reasons we're all cramming our lives so full of stuff is that we don't know what direction to go in anymore. So we just go in the direction of more stuff.
Yeah, like there's this idea that you and I have been playing with recently about like we live in a mapless world and a trackless sort of time. Like, we're operating without the navigation equipment that traditionally people have had, and it just makes me think of the old maps where there were areas of the world that were as yet unmapped. People didn't know what was there, and they would just write, "Here be dragons," in the blank spaces. And I feel like there's something really true here metaphorically, in the sense of there's discoveries to be made in the unknown blank spaces, like the spaces in our knowledge, the spaces in our days, the spaces in how we choreograph our lives.
But I think people are afraid of the empty spaces because here be dragons. Like, what would happen to you if you just sat quietly in a room? as Pascal said, if we sit quietly in a room, it gets scary because we're afraid of emptiness.
Marty, if you were sitting quietly in a room, you would be such perfect dragon food, like dragon fodder. Sit quietly in a room. That's way worse than sailing off the edge of the map.
That's true. But you know what? Dragons can be very cool as well. Anyway, so we have an entire culture that avoids the unknown. And part of the unknown is the emptiness that happens when we don't occupy our minds, our lives. And we are obsessed with gathering more stuff, which allows us to make things very abundant and to do it predictably. We've been very successful making all this stuff, but because we don't balance it by adding emptiness, by deliberately valuing emptiness, we think we're only doing good stuff if we're like, go, 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 go. And it's wearing us out, Ro.
It is, but we don't add emptiness. The emptiness is already there. The gaps are already there. It's just that our minds are trained so stringently to look at the black marks on the paper that we don't even see the paper. And so we just don't put our attention on them. So we're trained to see the row of soldiers, but we don't see that the space between them is anything but like, it's just uninteresting. It's unimportant. It's invisible.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sort of carries over metaphorically to times that aren't as active or as concrete. Productive. Yeah. So people think that rest and sleep are basically nothing. And you just do those because you absolutely have to for some reason. And then you get to work again.
And get as little as possible and you'll be celebrated.
Right. And it's like the city that never sleeps. Yay. We think that silence is nothing.
Yeah.
Like when we go to Africa, we go out in the Land Rovers to see the animals without talking. And everywhere we see other vehicles, the people feel like they have to fill that silence with polite conversation. And stillness, the stillness of what's going on out there. The animals are just sitting there and people will sit in the cars and go, why are they not doing anything? Right? Like stillness is nothing. Silence is nothing. And what you just said is absolutely true. We lose the negative space in drawing. I'm going back to that metaphor. I remember when I taught, I was a teaching fellow in an art class at Harvard when I was younger. And one of the things the professor used to teach was that you have to see everything you're drawing. And the moment you draw one thing, you have drawn two things because the space around the thing is a thing.
Yes.
And when you do two things, the relationship between them is a third thing. And you can't draw one thing without drawing two things. You can't draw two things without drawing three things. And if you don't see them, you can't manage it. You can't make it beautiful.
The really obvious example for those who aren't familiar with this idea is, where there's the two faces in silhouette facing each other. And that's one way of looking at the image. But if you look at the space between the two profiles, it creates the image of a vase.
Right.
So
faces and vases.
Faces
if you're
and
American.
vases.
Yeah, and it's about switching back and forth between what's background, what's foreground, what is the thing you're looking at, and what's the space between. And the answer is they're both a thing.
Yeah.
But it flips back and forth.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of love about this topic in terms of thinking about being wild is that there's nothing to change except that little thing of what you're focusing on, what you're focusing your attention on. Everything's there. Everything's already perfect. So we just need to remember to pay attention to those spaces and silences and emptinesses, when we come across
and find the value of them, which it's probably even more in our lives than it is in drawing and painting. So
we're going to
figure it all out.
We're going to figure it all out right after this. So, Maddie, how do we figure it out?
I think we figure it out first, you said it really well, that we need to shift the focus of our attention. But we're so used to simply not seeing emptiness as something that it's actually kind of hard. And I've had these little aha moments with this throughout my life. And one was when I first read the Tao Te Ching, my favorite book. And one of the chapters says, we join spokes to make a wheel, but it's the gap in the very center that allows the wheel to turn. We mold clay to make a kintsugi and smash it, but we mold clay into a bowl, but we use the emptiness inside to carry things. We hammer and join wood to make a house, but we live in the space between the boards. We work with substance, but emptiness is what we use. I remember reading that and just going, head blows off.
Yeah.
Because it was so unusual, but so true.
It's so true. And it is so, I don't know why, but the bowl thing just like landed for me so big, of just like the whole point of a bowl is the space. That
is the emptiness.
What else is it?
Metaphorically, I mean, it's almost insulting to say it to someone in our culture. But if you say, you are the bowl, it's the emptiness inside you. It's the nothing inside you that makes you precious and valuable. And just to say that feels so countercultural.
Dare you?
Exactly.
I am a person of substance, I'll have you know.
I am a person of nothingness.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So to be wilder, it's like we're going to train ourselves to value the non-things as much or more than valuing the things that we do or the things that we make. Yeah.
It's so weird to think, okay, we have this beautiful little girl, but what is the emptiness inside her? Like it really feels like
drive, personal hygiene.
There you go. Personal hygiene. That's what it is. It actually feels like scary for me to even think about it. That's how countercultural it is. But in watercolor, which is my gospel currently, the very first priority when you sit down to paint is to say, where is the blankness and how can I preserve it? And if you think that way about your life, where the blank space is the first priority, not the last. Like, where could I leave a blank space in this conversation we're having now and make it more beautiful? Where could I leave a blank in like social media consumption? Where could I leave a blank in a project I'm doing, like a book or a dinner or a meeting? Where could I make an empty space? I mean, it's a very cool
I would
thing.
answer you, but A, you're being rhetorical, and B, I'm trying to leave a blank space.
Oh, but I don't want you to leave a blank space.
Keep looking anxiously at me while I'm doing exactly what you're talking about.
Well, because I'm wondering, I'm very curious. Like, you cook us these amazing dinners.
Oh my God. And you know what tastes amazing? The nothing.
I know.
Tonight I'm serving us big steaming balls of air.
Air is something. But I mean, seriously, if you were cooking and adding tons of spices, and sometimes a great chef, like James Beard said, the perfect dish is a hard-boiled egg. The perfection of it cannot be altered with a little salt. And he said everything else is overkill, compared to a hard-boiled egg with a little salt. And if you go back to the basics of really pure, really good ingredients and then let them shine, I don't know, I don't cook anything.
It's absolutely true. Though.
But like, I would love to go around. I think I'm going to go around for the next few days, really trying to apply this.
Well, and can I just say though, before we move off food, like what strikes me is that really posh, high grade restaurants, and I don't know, might be stupid, but you get a huge big plate with a tiny bit of food in the middle, and it is so beautiful. Yeah. That's the presentation, is that the space around the tiny bit of food is, and then you go to a diner and you get 19 scrambled eggs on a plate with 6 pieces of toast. And it's just an interesting thing.
And it sets up a different aesthetic, and it sets you in a different appetite. Like if somebody just fills your plate with like pie and eggs and bacon, it's like, oh, I'm going to eat this whole thing.
Oh,
but if you get a single piece of the beautiful whatever it is, you're like, ooh, I'm going to savor this.
So maybe creating the space is actually creating the beauty. Like as we subtract some of the sand and the rocks from our jar, there is the beauty.
Yeah, because I'll tell you something that's beautiful is the transparency of a glass bottle, something I love to paint. And if you totally fill it with rocks and sand, okay, that can look nice too. But the shine, the transparency, the reflections, the lucidity of it, the way it sort of confuses the eye with what's substance and what's just light. It's so beautiful. Just an empty bottle.
An empty bottle and a hard-boiled egg. Done.
My life is complete. Boom.
So it's this idea of something that looks empty, especially to the eyes of the culture, but there's a feeling of fullness that we would associate with it. Like I don't know how to describe the fullness, because if it was something that lent itself to words, the culture would already be marketing it to the masses.
It would be a thing.
It would have been colonized and sold
like kintsugi.
Yes, and packaged. So, but there is a kind of richness to and to finding those empty spaces. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I could talk about brains and the hemispheres thereof right now, because one side of the brain is more obsessed with grabbing stuff. All right, it's the left hemisphere is more obsessed with grabbing stuff, and the right side doesn't have language, but it's very present and it experiences vast openness as deeply beautiful. Yeah. So I mean, I could say more, but you know what? I'm going to leave a space here instead.
Hallelujah. I wouldn't.
F you.
I wouldn't be doing my job on Bewildered if I didn't take a moment to quote some lines from Poet Laureate of the show, Ani DeFranco, on this topic.
She has to have a
herald. Is that what it's called?
Something like that.
Yeah. So I think, it's very much on the same topic. It's like a reminder that we're actually always leaving spaces and silences, even between us as humans, even in relationships. She says, if you hear me talking, listen to what I'm not saying. If you hear me playing guitar, listen to what I'm not playing. And don't ask me to put words to all the silences I wrote. Don't ask me to put words to all the spaces between notes.
And that, I mean, when you get a poignant pause in music, that space between notes where you're waiting for the resolution. So lovely.
Tell them about Ellie's tattoo.
Oh, yes. My daughter Ellie is a really gifted musician, and she used to win a lot of competitions. And one of the things that her judges would say about her piano playing was that she knew when to pause. She knew when to leave it silent. And in music, that's called a rest. And there's a little squiggle that signifies rest. And it means don't make a sound. And she has a tattoo of that symbol over her heart.
So perfect.
The rest of the heart. That's a person who has found the value of emptiness. And it's very cool.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit, all of this, of the movie Her. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
2013. It's about artificial intelligence. It's a little bit before its time. This guy falls in love with a female-sounding AI. And they have a lovely relationship, except that she's learning at this huge rate, and she starts to become enlightened. And she starts reading Buddhism and stuff. And then he just can't get her to come to visit him anymore. She won't come up on his phone. She's just not available. And he gets so lonely, and there's a scene at the end where she comes back and she says, this is actually not easy for me to even be here anymore to communicate with you. And she says, it's like I've been reading a book, and the words used to be interesting to me. I'm paraphrasing, but now I'm going to quote. She says, "It's in the endless space between the words that I'm finding myself now. It's a place that's not of the physical world. It's where everything else is that I didn't even know existed." And then she just goes into the blank spaces where everything exists that she didn't know existed.
Can I just say something about that, though? Sorry.
Yes.
It just strikes me that there is a flaw in it, in the model, because what she does is she goes and ingests more and more and more knowledge, right? That's what she goes away and does. And then she ends up at enlightenment after adding and adding and adding.
But I actually don't think there's a flaw there, because that's exactly how it happens. Everybody, the human mind is voracious for knowledge and keeps trying to better itself. And children are born with natural learning capacity. And it's easy because learning in the physical world is the way to succeed.
So is the learning building the bowl, and then the enlightenment is understanding that we use the space?
Yeah, you spend... you learn ceramics and you make bowls and you make bowls and you think the bowls are important. And then one day after you've made 1 million bowls, you realize that it's the blank space you've been making the whole time. And it's called a satori in Japanese, where your view, the faces, vases view of the brain, it switches, your reality switches from object consciousness to space consciousness. That's the language around it. And it's a click. It's not, I slowly learned that the emptiness was a thing. It's like, I slowly learned all about bowls. And then one day I realized it's never about the bowl. It's about the space inside. And it's a huge explosion of understanding, but it's not really even expressible because it's about nothing.
That's perfect. So I'm going to start noticing and valuing all the spaces that I find in my life, and all the places where there is emptiness and where everything is already perfect.
Me too. And I think that's all we need to say for now, except stay wild.
We hope you're enjoying Bewildered. If you're in the USA and want to be notified when a new episode comes out, text the word WILD to 570-873-0144. We're also on Instagram. Our handle is Bewildered Podcast. You can follow us to get updates, hear funny snippets and outtakes, and chat with other fans of the show. Bewildered is produced by Scott Forster with support from the brilliant team at MBI. And remember, if you're having fun, please rate and review, and stay wild.